When the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Pine Ridge, not a soul dared to venture near the old abandoned mine. Stories swirled through the town, like whispers carried on a breeze, about the curse that hung over that shadowy hole in the ground. The mine had claimed lives, left families in anguish, and now carried the heavy weight of forgotten tales. But on that night, a 14-year-old girl named Emma was about to change everything. Emma was a curious soul, a wild heart wrapped in childhood innocence. She'd spent summers exploring the woods, creating adventures out of thin air. But this time was different. That night, she and her friends dared each other to explore the Mina Forbidden Zone. As laughter echoed beneath the weight of the night, Emma felt a pull, an itch that beckoned her deeper into the unknown. With a flickering flashlight and a racing heart, Emma ducked under a rusted fence and stepped over an old wooden beam, each creak underfoot a reminder of the mine's age. It was colder inside, the kind of cold that cut through skin and bone. The air felt thick, pregnant with mystery. With every step, the walls closed in around her, the darkness swallowing her whole. Her friend Jake called from behind, but Emma's adventurous spirit pushed her forward. The beam of her flashlight danced across rough walls, revealing sketches and carvings left by miners long gone. She imagined their lives, their struggles, the tales they might tell. But as the darkness deepened, the atmosphere shifted. A sound, perhaps just a drip of water echoing in the stillness, made her pause. It echoed, sending shivers down her spine. She shook her head, brushing off the feeling. She was Emma, strong and brave, the fearless explorer. But in the corners of her mind, shadows loomed. The story seeped in, whispering dread. Then came the moment that would seal her fate, a sudden rumble, the earth quaking beneath her. From below, a loud crack resounded, and before she knew it, the ground fell away. The world tilted. She screamed. The flashlight flickered, illuminating a sheer drop as she tumbled into darkness, her scream swallowed by the mine. When Emma's friends finally made their way out, panic set in. They called and called her name until their voices turned hoarse. But as midnight crept closer, the heavy weight of despair blanketed them. They ran to the nearest house, trembling, stammering tales of falling rocks and darkness. No one believed them at first. No one could accept that their Emma was gone. The following day, a frantic search party scoured the area. They brought dogs and drones and made pleas on local news, showing pictures of Emma, her bright smile and wild hair. A tight-lipped urgency hung in the air. Friends and family organized, helping search the woods, the roads, the mountainsides, but with every passing hour, the flame of hope flickered dimmer. Days turned into weeks as the search continued, each moment dragging with unbearable weight. Days that bled into sleepless nights filled with worry. Emma's parents couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, not knowing if their daughter lay injured somewhere, alone, or worse. The warmth of summer began to chill, resonating with the sinking feeling in their hearts. The autumn leaves fell, carpeted the forest floors, and with them, the silent prayers that echoed through the town. Then, 30 days after Emma disappeared, an explosion echoed through Pine Ridge, ripping through the air like thunder. Workers were drilling in an adjacent area of the mine, reopening the abandoned tunnels, set to explore its secrets. No one anticipated what they would find. A tremor ran through the ground, and the drill bit broke through a wall, opening a pathway into the darkness. Dust exploded outward, and in the midst, among the rubble and rock, lay a small figure, curled and fragile but breathing. It was Emma. Rescue teams rushed in, disbelief mixed with jubilation. As they pulled Emma from the mine, the community erupted, not just at having recovered her, but at the immense relief that rippled through every heart. She was conscious, dazed, and her eyes flickered with confusion and fear, but she was alive. She's here. The shout reverberated through the town like a warm wave of heat, igniting joy in every heart that had left hope stranded over the weeks. For Emma, the world outside felt almost alien now, so far removed from the confines of dark stone and solitude. She looked different, her clothes tattered, her skin smudged with dirt, but her spirit remained unbroken. As she was rushed to the hospital, the questions flooded in. How had she survived? What had happened in those 30 long days? But the answers were tangled in her memories, hazy and fragmented. Over time, as she sat surrounded by her family and friends, the those pieces began to emerge. I was trapped in a small space. I thought I wouldn't get out, Emma recounted to her parents, tears brimming in her wide eyes. In the dark, Emma faced her fears alone. Nights blurred together as time moved differently beneath the Earth's surface. She recalled the echoes of her voice bouncing off the stone walls, the dreadful silence after. But she also remembered the small glimmers of hope that refused to fade completely. She had rationed her energy, found pockets of water seeping through, and held on to dreams of seeing her family again. Emma had clawed her way through the suffocating darkness, fighting against both despair and her own thoughts. Days turned into weeks, and as the town rejoiced, Emma's return triggered something deeper. Not just relief, but a massive wave of gratitude washed over Pine Ridge. Local news highlighted the story, turning Emma into a symbol of resilience and hope. Yet the scars of survival remained. Each interview brought Emma back to those dark days, the feelings of isolation creeping back. It's common for survivors to struggle with their experience and echo of post-traumatic stress, where darkness seems to linger just beneath the surface, ready to swallow you whole again. Weeks later, Emma sat in a circle support groups now part of her routine. Other survivors gathered, sharing their own tales. Each story mirrored her struggle in different ways. Emma learned she wasn't alone in grappling with her fears, in finding her footing in a world that often felt like it had abandoned her. In facing her demons, she gained power. She began to speak up, to embrace her identity, drawing strength from both her journey and those around her. As she stood before her peers one evening, sharing her story, her hands trembling but resolute, Emma felt the weight lifting. I was lost, but I found my way back. Each word resonated like a beating drum against the fears that sought to pin her down. Eyes glistened, and nods of understanding rippled through the room. Months passed, and Emma's life started to pulse with color again. Every morning felt like a gift, each laugh shared with friends a reminder that joy still existed, despite the lingering shadows. Adventures in the woods transformed no longer fixtures of fear but pathways of rediscovery. The town rallied around her, holding events for missing children, creating awareness about safety, and coming together in ways they never had before. The mine, once a dark hole of despair, became a touchstone for the transformation Emma sparked. With intense resolve, she advocated for safety, working tirelessly alongside families who had experienced similar tragedies. Her voice became a beacon. It resonated across Pine Ridge, reminding everyone about the preciousness of life. Emma wasn't just a survivor, she became a warrior. Years passed, and though shadows would always linger, Emma learned they could coexist with light. She traveled, speaking at schools and organizations, sharing her story of survival, resilience, and the way darkness can transform into glorious light. She empowered youth, urging real conversations about mental health, about overcoming fears, about reaching out. Emma changed lives while healing her own, a spiral of courage that reached out, touching others till they felt the warmth of hope reignite in their hearts. Looking back, Emma knew that the girl everyone thought was dead had emerged from the darkness, not just to survive but to thrive. She carried her journey proudly, a reminder that even when life seems insurmountable, the human spirit can rise. As she stood at the entrance of that old mine, now covered with flowers and plaques that celebrated the lives it had touched, she felt a sense of peace, an understanding of her past that had once haunted her. Emma was ready for the future, empowered by her past and the indomitable spirit that had guided her home. And even as she turned her back to the shadows of that mine, a light shone brightly in her heart, illuminating all the paths yet to explore. She had been found. She had come back. And now, the world was her adventure once more. In the small town of Crestwood, one fateful night spun a web of darkness that would grip the community and ripple through lives forever. The stars hung like silent sentinels, unaware of what was brewing beneath their gaze. It was a night that would become an infamous tale, the disappearance of a girl named Lily. Lily was 14, with a shock of curl that framed her freckled face and a smile that could light up the gloomiest of days. Her laughter was a melody, often echoing through the woods as she and her friends explored the abandoned textile mill just outside town. But summer nights have their dangers, especially when curiosity meets neglect. That night, fueled by dares and a thirst for adventure, Lily and her friends made a split-second decision to step into the mouth of an old mine that had long been shunned. She grinned, her excitement contagious. Her friends hesitated, nerves dancing in their eyes. But when Lily's enthusiasm proved too hard to resist, they followed her into the yawning darkness. Flashlights flickered to life, piercing through the thick veil of shadows that wrapped around the entrance. Each step reverberated against the damp stone, their laughter fading into an oppressive silence. Something shifted in the air, a coldness that made the hairs on their arms stand at attention. They ventured deeper, marveling at walls adorned with minerals glistening like lost treasures. But then, without warning, the ground trembled beneath them. A rumble echoed, followed by a deafening crash. Panic seized Lily's heart as she felt the earth give way, a sudden drop that sent her spiraling into the abyss. Her friends screamed, but their voices faded to a distant echo as the darkness enveloped her, swallowing her whole. Back in town, when the morning light broke through the trees, panic turned the air electric. Lily's friends had stumbled back, breathless and trembling, eyes wide with fear. "She's gone." They yelled, struggling to find words, struggling to grasp reality. Word spread like wildfire. Parents, friends, and neighbors converged outside the mine, the weight of despair pulling at them like heavy chains. For Lily's mother, time stood still, a cruel, unyielding pause. She grasped onto the hope that every mother carries, the faith that somehow her girl would be found safe. Search teams mobilized, scouring the land for any signs of Lily. Days bled together, the sun rising and setting with a monotonous cruelty. Search parties descended into the mine, armed with flashlights and unwavering determination. But the deeper they ventured, the more silence greeted them. It felt as if the mine held its breath, protecting its secrets. Families in Crestwood clung to each other under the weight of uncertainty, grappling with the void Lily left behind her empty chair at dinner, the laughter that would never echo again. Signs plastered across town begged for information. They cried from every lamppost, every corner store. But as weeks passed, hope began to dim like the flickering candles in their homes. Seeking solace, Lily's mother roamed the woods, praying to the spirits of the forest, pleading into the air for her daughter's safe return. She held onto a belief that perhaps Lily had found a way to survive, that a spark of life still flickered deep within that cold mine. In the meantime, the town grew restless. Questions turned into whispers. What if Lily had simply run away? What if she was lost not just in the mine, but in her mind? These thoughts gnawed at the edges of reality, but in the collective heart of Crestwood, denial echoed back. Lily wouldn't just vanish. Then, 30 days after her disappearance, an unexpected tremor rocked the landscape. It wasn't caused by a storm or an earthquake. It came from the mine. Workers on the outskirts were performing routine checks and raised the alarm when they heard the peculiar rumbling. They wondered aloud, hearts pounding with dread and curiosity. Their drills had struck something. They moved forward, guided solely by instinct and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd find something other than darkness. When they broke through into the main chamber of the mine, it was a discovery that sent shockwaves through the small town. Amidst the debris lay a figure, a small, frail form. Gasps filled the air as they rushed to her side. It was Lily. She was alive. As rescue teams pulled her out, the town erupted. Relief poured over them like a healing balm, but beneath the celebration lay a complex web of emotions. What had happened to Lily during those 30 agonizing days? Lily awoke in a hospital bed surrounded by the familiar scents and sounds of home, but everything felt strange. The faces of her family hovered at the edge of her consciousness, worried and worn. As the reality of her survival settled in, fragments of memory began to unravel in her mind. "I fell," she murmured, her voice barely more than a whisper. The doctors examined her, treating the physical wounds, but the real battle lay within. Help came in various forms, therapists armed with understanding and compassion, urging Lily to confront the darkness she had faced. It wasn't easy. Survivors often carry the invisible weight of trauma, a burden that festers unseen. While the town celebrated what they thought was a miraculous return, Lily fought to make sense of her experience. She had been trapped in that mine, alone, surrounded by echoes of fear. The isolation was suffocating, but oddly, she forged a bond with the darkness, speaking to it as if it were a friend. She learned to live on crumbs of hope, glimpses of light in the choking shadows. In those dark moments, when panic clawed at her throat and despair whispered that she wouldn't be found, she remembered to breathe. "Just keep going," she told herself over and over. Those words became her lifeline. Weeks turned into months, and while the town celebrated her return with parades and ceremonies, Lily faced the reality of what she'd lived through. With therapy, she began to express what had happened, how she had roamed the dark corridors, frantically searching for an exit that never seemed to appear. "I tried to scream," she shared one day in a support group reserved for survivors. The vulnerable sharing stirred a connection among attendees, a web of experiences stitched together by pain and perseverance. It takes incredible strength to confront trauma, to lift the veil and finally release those oppressive fears. But across that circle, the understanding was palpable, a silent promise that no one had to face the shadows alone. As Lily continued her journey of healing, she transformed her experience into something that could empower both herself and others. She realized that every story has the power to inspire, to ignite. She began speaking in schools about her experience, sharing her journey from darkness into light. "Even in the dark, you can find strength within yourself," she tells students, wide-eyed and eager. Each audience she faced became a gathering of hope, her words resonating with those who might feel trapped in their own darkness. But even within the light, shadows still lurked. Some nights, nightmares invaded her sleep, and in the quiet hours, panic would rise like a tide. The journey to healing was not linear, it ebbed and flowed. But each day brought with it new resilience, a reminder of survival and a testament to life's fragility. Lily learned to confront her fears step by step. She hiked in the woods again, finding solace among the whispering trees. Joy emerged slowly, like flowers blooming in the spring after a long winter. Her friends rallied around her, encouraging her to find joy in the little things. They crafted adventures, creating moments of laughter that filled the spaces where fear once resided. As the seasons changed, Crestwood transformed into a community forged through shared struggle. Conversations evolved, breaking the silence surrounding mental health. Every event organized in honor of Lily became a catalyst, pushing others toward understanding, compassion, and unity. Then came the day when Lily stepped back into the mine not to face darkness but to reclaim her story. She stood at the entrance, heart pounding. It was where she had once encountered her greatest fear. But now, it represented not just survival but the power of transformation. Courageous and resolute, she entered the mine alongside her friends. Each step held echoes of memories, the laughter, the silence, and the fear. Armed with light, they illuminated the depths that had once confined her spirit. The mine was quiet now, consumed by an eternal stillness, each shadow a reminder of her journey. Upon exiting, Lily turned to her friends and smiled. "I faced it and I'm still here," she said. The mine became a metaphor, no longer merely an old, abandoned space, but a testament to resilience and the ongoing journey of healing. The town, its spirit renewed, rebuilt itself around Lily's story, turning tragedy into strength. Years faded like pages in a book, and life for Lily continued to unfold in vibrant colors. Her laughter, once lost, blossomed anew, echoing through the woods, blending seamlessly with the whispers of the trees. She became more than a survivor. She became a beacon of hope, showing that even in the depths of despair, we can rise and find our way back to the light. Lily's journey from darkness to illumination became a legacy, a reminder that we can transcend our fears and turn our darkest moments into fuel for our strongest aspirations. She had been found, not just from the mind, but within herself, where true strength and light would always reside. In the small, seemingly tranquil town of Maplewood, a dense fog rolled in one fateful evening, hiding secrets as old as the earth itself. It wrapped around the trees, draped over houses, and settled over the abandoned mine just outside town, a place that once echoed with laughter, but now only whispered tales of danger. That evening, a vibrant 14-year-old girl named Mia would step into those shadows, and the world as everyone knew it would change forever. Mia was a spark, her energy infectious, her laughter like music in the air. Friends often followed her into adventures, drawn by her reckless spirit. She would say, her eyes glinting with excitement. That evening, during a late summer gathering with friends, her curiosity had peaked once more at the sight of the old mine. Mia urged, her enthusiasm pulling them closer. Her friends hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. The mine had a notorious reputation. It was dark and dangerous, a crumbling remnant of a forgotten past. But Mia's excitement soon proved irresistible. They ventured inside, flashlights casting beams against the rough stone walls, illuminating the way into the unknown. As they moved deeper, the air grew thick and stale. They switched off their lights to hear the enveloping silence, a silence so deep it felt daunting, a cavernous void that swallowed every sound. But the thrill surged through Mia, pushing her further into the shadows. She shouted, darting ahead, her laughter ringing like a bell. But then came the deafening crack that shattered the silence. The ground shook, almost as if the mine itself was warning them to turn back. In an instant, the walls collapsed, rocks tumbling down, creating an inescapable trap. Panic set in. Her friend screamed as she stumbled and fell. A cloud of dust enveloped her, and she wasn't sure if she was dreaming or awake when the darkness consumed her. Outside, flashing lights and worried faces filled the air as friends rushed to find help. Mia's parents were quickly alerted, their faces ashen, hearts racing. It was a nightmare unfolding, one they couldn't comprehend. The minutes dragged on like hours, and whispers of dread danced through the crowd. It wasn't just a search, they feared the worst. Search teams mobilized quickly the next day, combing through the mine with newfound urgency. Darkness loomed over Maplewood as every crevice was explored, every echo scrutinized. But as hours turned into days, hope waned. Where was Mia? How could she disappear so completely? Days blurred together, a tapestry of despair for each family member, each friend. Every night, Mia's mother sat awake, praying, held captive by anguish, unable to sleep, fearing the worst. As the sun began to set on the sixth day, a tense stillness hung over the community. Individuals gathered, lighting candles in remembrance, tears cascading like rain as they lit each wick with a shared hope Mia would find her way home. They exchanged stories of her bravery, of her laughter, holding onto the memories of the girl who had filled their lives with joy. On the seventh day, however, a fateful call shattered the quiet. Over by a shift in the mine, an unusual sound had been detected. Rescue teams rushed back to the site, their hearts racing. They listened intently, holding their breath. It was faint but unmistakable, a weak voice. Help! It was Mia. Rescuers scrambled, forging ahead, the sound guiding them deeper into the mine's dark belly. Their hearts raced with hope and fear, amplifying the urgency of their movements. Each footstep brought them closer to salvation, propelling them through narrow passageways thick with dust and despair. As they rounded the final bend, they found her Mia, weak and scared, but alive. She lay trapped beneath fallen debris, fractured light spilling in through crevices of crushed stone. Relief and disbelief washed over the rescuers like tidal waves. They worked deftly, unearthing her from the rubble, careful not to cause any further injuries. Mia, one of the rescuers shouted as they approached. Came the faint reply, filled with both pain and hope. That evening, as Mia was pulled from the mine, the town erupted in euphoria. Stunned faces transformed into smiles, tears turned into laughter as the impossible became reality. They wrapped her in blankets, scooping her up into their arms. They cried, the joy palpable. But as joyous as the return was, Mia faced a different battle, the silent, invisible scars that lay beneath the surface. Days passed and her body healed, but the experience weighed heavily on her mind. The endless nights in darkness, the deafening silence that surrounded her, those memories haunted her. She had survived, yes, but the shadows of her past loomed large. Mia sat in her room, the sunlight streaming through the window, casting warmth across the carpet. But even then, anxiety clawed at her. Those quiet moments became her greatest challenge. Every noise echoed louder in her mind, a reminder of her time in the mine. Mia learned that survivors often have to navigate the wilderness of their emotions. She turned to therapy, where she discovered it was okay to be vulnerable. Speaking to a trained professional helped her verbalize her fears, the nights she had spent screaming for help, believing no one would come. Weeks turned into months as Mia slowly opened up about her experience. The weight of it all was paralyzing at times, but she realized she was not alone in her struggle. Many people in Maplewood rallied around her, sharing their own tales of survival and vulnerability. Her story became a bridge, connecting hearts and souls in the community. As time moved forward, Mia discovered new strength in herself. She found comfort not only in discussing her trauma, but also in empowering others. Each time she shared her experiences, she called upon her most terrifying memories yet transformed them into lessons. That spirit spread like wildfire. Mia organized support groups, creating a sanctuary for others facing their own battles. Together, they talked, cried, shared smiles, creating a safe space to heal. In opening herself up, she not only became an inspiration but began to heal herself. One bright Saturday, the town held a festival, a celebration of what it meant to rise from the ashes. Mia stood on stage, sunlight warming her face. She felt the warmth of the crowd surrounding her, arms stretched out in love and support. What was once a place of despair turned into a celebration of hope. "Thank you all for being my light when I felt lost in the dark," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. The cheers erupted, but it wasn't just the words that resonated. It was the genuine determination that filled the air. Mia knew deep within her soul that she had transformed not only herself but the landscape of her community. The mine, once a haunting memory, now stood as a testament to resilience and love. Though flashes of anxiety would still visit her, Mia had learned to face them head-on, to breathe through the moments of doubt. She embraced her life, filling it with meaning, creating experiences that fueled her spirit. The healing journey was not linear. There were ups and downs. But with friends and family beside her, Mia learned to embrace each day, becoming a beacon of hope for others searching amid their own darkness. By channeling her pain into purpose, Mia reclaimed her story and transformed tragedy into triumph. As the years rolled on, she was no longer defined by the shadows of the mine, but rather by the light she created in the world around her. In the warm embrace of Maplewood, the old mine became a gathering ground, a space for reflection, and a sanctuary that echoed with laughter. Friends visited the site, not in fear but in remembrance. Together, they forged a path of healing, a journey where every person's story intertwined with love and resilience. Mia emerged not just as a survivor, but a warrior, a spirit unbroken by darkness, willing to share the light and lift others along the way. As she stood at the entrance of the mine, she turned around, ready to step into the bright future that awaited her, ready to embrace life with open arms. She had faced the darkness and emerged, not just alive but truly living. Deep in the heart of Pelham Valley, there was an old, abandoned mine that seemed to stand as a guardian of secrets. Locals whispered about it, their voices low, as if afraid that simply speaking its name would summon ghosts from the past. It had been years since the last miner had walked its dark tunnels. Time had worn down the entrance, creating an eerie shadow that stretched like fingers into the forest. But one fateful night in late summer, a 14-year-old girl named Ava would enter that mine, and the world would never be the same. Ava was a bright spark of energy. Her laughter seemed to chase away clouds. She lived for adventure and always encouraged her friends to push their limits. She would say, coaxing them into escapades that others would have deemed reckless. But that night her friends hesitated when she suggested heading to the mine. "We shouldn't be there," they murmured. Ava sighed. "Come on, just for a minute." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and eventually they found themselves at the mine's entrance, where the darkness seemed to pull them in like a siren's call. With flashlights in hand, they stepped into the cool embrace of the mine. The walls were slick with moisture, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rust. Each echoing step sent a shiver down their spines, the darkness swallowing their voices. But Ava was fearless. She declared, her voice reverberating through the chambers of stone. The deeper they ventured, the more the light from outside diminished. Moments later, an ominous rumble echoed in the distance, an unwelcome reminder of how unpredictable the world could be. Fear began to claw at the edges of their hearts. "Maybe we should go back," one of her friends suggested, glancing nervously around. But just then, before they could turn back, the ceiling gave way and rocks tumbled down. The friend screamed, scrambling backward as Ava lost her footing on the uneven ground. She vanished into the blackness with a chilling silence that felt like the end of everything. Outside, panic erupted. Ava's friends sprinted to town, gasping for breath as they recounted the horror. They begged for help, but disbelief washed over the adults. Ava's mother cried, her heart pounding within her chest. The search began immediately, a frantic effort that would stretch into days. As night fell again, search teams descended into the valley, combing through thick underbrush, calling Ava's name. The mine was their first stop, but the towering entrance seemed to mock their desperation. Trained dogs searched tirelessly, their noses to the ground, while helicopters circled above, casting shadows over the search party like benevolent giants darting through the twilight. Days passed. The sun rose and fell, and with each sunset, hope dimmed a little more. "She's just lost. She has to be okay," Ava's father said, clenching his fists, trying to convince himself as much as those around him. Friends and family clung to the idea that Ava would emerge from the dark, laughing as if none of this had ever happened. However, the cold reality pressed down on the town like a heavy fog. The search felt endless and heartbreaking. They pleaded. Cannon fire of emotions roared as rumors spread. The darker possibilities flickered in the minds of everyone. Accidents, wild animals, even the idea she could have run away from everything, leaving the chaos behind. Then came the fourth day, the day they feared the worst. Hope was wearing thin when a breakthrough came in the form of a rescue worker who had been down in the mine. Something had changed. There was a noise, faint but unmistakable, a voice echoing from deep within the darkness. "Help!" Rescue teams flooded the scene, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They mapped out their ascent into the mine, guided by that haunting shred of life. The lead rescuer shouted, their voices trembling with concern as they navigated the treacherous paths in the dark. Every footfall felt momentous, each heartbeat amplified in the endless void. They called, hoping against hope, "Stay where you are." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they rounded a corner and found her. Ava was trapped but alive, standing beneath a precarious pile of debris that had become her cage. Relief flooded the team. This found girl was no ghost. She was flesh and blood. They shouted, rushing to her. Choking back tears, they carefully began to free her from the rubble. "Hold on." They encouraged, every ounce of caution merging with the urgency of her condition. As they brushed the last remnants of stone away, they pulled her from the darkness, the beam of hope radiating in that otherwise terrifying space. When Ava emerged into the daylight, she was a mixture of confusion and disbelief, but she was safe. "You found me," she whispered, tears streaming as she staggered forward into the arms of her mother. They held each other tightly, collapsing to the ground in a whirlwind of emotion. As the community erupted into celebration, Ava was rushed to the hospital for evaluation. Days of trauma began to catch up with her, the memories of darkness, the feeling of isolation, and the search for hope in a void that had seemed endless. Friends and family gathered around, but deep down, she was a world apart, gripped by her own thoughts. The first few nights at home were filled with an unsettling quietness, broken only by the rustling of leaves outside her window, which quickly turned into a haunting reminder of the mine. Each sound felt magnified, and her mind spiraled with fears that resurfaced unbidden. Ava would wake in a cold sweat, her heart racing as she recalled every detail of that hellish time underground. For many, the scars of survival are invisible, woven into the complexities of their psyche. Research shows that survivors often grapple with understanding their trauma, reconstructing those moments of fear into something they can digest. And as every counselor would tell them, healing isn't linear, it ebbs and flows like tides, sometimes eroding the shores of progress they had built. But Ava was determined not to let those memories define her. Seeking help, she began to share her experiences with trained professionals who encouraged her to face the darkness head-on. Each session peeled back layers of fear and doubt like an onion, exposing raw wounds needing healing. "Mama, I'm okay," she would tell her mother through tears, trying to reassure herself as much as sketching out a bright future. But while she outwardly promised strength, nightmares would still erupt, leaving her panting and fearful in the dead of night, wondering if the shadows would swallow her whole again. Weeks turned into months, and Ava slowly began to reclaim parts of her life. With her friends rallying around her, they formed a support group, a safe sanctuary where they could speak openly about their fears and hopes. The mind had tried to shroud Ava in darkness. Now together, they stood in the light, forging connections that allowed everyone to heal. Organizing events to share their stories, Ava learned that there's power in vulnerability. One evening, under twinkling stars, she gathered her friends and shared those haunting moments she'd spent buried alive. "I was scared," she confessed, her voice unwavering. Empowered by the warmth of understanding, the group delved deeper into their emotions, weaving threads of resilience into a collective narrative. They understood that being found meant more than just physical safety. It extended to feeling seen after pain. The town began to rally around Ava and her friends. Awareness campaigns sprang up, shining a light on mental health and emotional healing. They turned the mind into a place for reflection, a silent monument that held the ghosts of the past, but also the promise of a brighter future. Then, one day, Ava and her friends stood at the mine's entrance, no longer an ominous portal to the unknown, but a symbol of their shared journey. Together, they picked up shovels, planting flowers and marking paths with stones, transforming the dark corners of their memories into vibrant reminders of growth and unity. "Let's celebrate life," Ava proclaimed as they toiled under the sun, the air thick with love and laughter. In those moments, the mind shifted from a haunted hollowness to a garden of resilience where new life could flourish just beyond despair. Years later, reflecting on her experience from a healthy distance, Ava understood the light that emerged from her darkness. She became an advocate for those unheeded voices, speaking in schools and community centers about hope, healing, and the strength woven within vulnerability. One afternoon, as she spoke at a local high school, she glanced around at eager faces, minds hungry for growth. "It's okay to be scared," she told them, her voice steady yet kind. "But remember, you don't have to live in the dark." That was the lesson Ava learned and now shared, a battle fought and won not just by one, but by many. Each life touched through vulnerability could ignite a spark capable of illuminating the darkest tunnels. And as she stood at the mine's entrance once more, flowers blooming in vibrant colors surrounding her, Ava knew she had not merely survived, but truly thrived, reclaiming every aspect of her life. She had journeyed from darkness, forged a path through hell and back, and emerged bright, resilient, and alive. The mine had once tried to take her, but now it stood as a testament not just of survival, but of hope, a beacon where light could flourish against the shadows, reminding everyone that even in the deepest darkness, life can always be found again. It was a chill autumn day when the news broke. In a small town where everyone knew everyone, the whispers started swirling, spreading through the streets like wildfire. "Ava is missing," echoed through the air, stinging the hearts of those who heard it. Just a couple of weeks shy of her 15th birthday, Ava was known for her bright smile, adventurous spirit, and dreams as vast as the sky. The last anyone had seen her was on a dare with friends, to explore the old abandoned mine just outside town. The mine had long been condemned, its entrance closed off with rusted gates and warnings of danger. But for kids searching for thrill, it was the ultimate challenge. Ava had urged her friends to come along, and with every giggle and nudge, they followed her deeper into the shadows. Crammed inside that dark corridor, the air felt thick, like stepping into a different world. Flashlights danced across the rough walls, revealing craggy formations and forgotten relics. Ava chirped, her voice cutting through the unease. But the excitement turned sour quickly when a deep, ominous rumble reverberated from inside the earth. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a horror-stricken moment ensued. Rocks began to fall, crashing down around them. Someone screamed as panic took hold. In the chaos, Ava lost her balance and fell, disappearing into the enveloping darkness just as the entrance collapsed. Her friends raced outside, breathless and terrified, but for Ava, a nightmare had just begun. The call to search for her went out immediately. A powerful blend of fear and determination gripped the town. Search dogs, trained to find individuals lost in the wild, swarmed the area, their noses sniffing intently through thickets and brambles. News spread rapidly, the search becoming front-page headlines that drowned the local news in urgency. Became the mantra that spread from porch to porch, igniting a rallying cry among neighbors and strangers alike. As hours turned into days, officials organized search parties, scouring every inch of the mine. Her father, Tom, asked, trying to convince himself as much as everyone else. But dread crept in like a thief at night. It was hard to imagine Ava in the darkness, alone and vulnerable. Each evening fell heavy with disbelief, the air thick with mounting despair. Ava's absence left a hollow space that her family and friends struggled to fill. Candlelight vigils became a beacon of hope, illuminating the darkened nights. Find Ava posters plastered the town, her bright smile staring back at everyone, reminding them that she was still out there. The days dragged on, spiraling closer to a week of uncertainty. This was a moment that would etch itself into the fabric of Maplewood, a tiny town suddenly captured in a horrifying narrative. The weight of the unknown settled like fog over every doorstep, mingling with anxiety. Then, on the seventh day, the ground shifted again. Only this time it wasn't from the tremors of a collapsing mine. It was the sound of rescuers breaking through from above. Guided by the faint whispers of human life, they ventured deeper into the mine, hearts pounding in sync. As they forged ahead, they called Ava's name, hoping that against all reason she would respond. "Can you hear me?" A voice echoed through the dark, each syllable heavy with urgency. Silence paid them back, until a soft but clear voice emerged, breaking through the uncertainty that had gripped all who searched. "Help!" The sound was delicate yet filled with a fierce will to survive. Joyful shouts erupted above ground, igniting a renewed sense of hope. They cried, irritation and fatigue transforming into adrenaline. The rescue teams hustled further into the belly of the mine, guided by the sound of Ava's voice, inching closer with every step. When they finally reached her, Ava was trapped under a pile of debris, her body small and frail against the overwhelming rock. One rescuer reassured, even as fear knotted in his stomach. Unraveling the rubble took time, moments that felt like an eternity. The stakes rose every second she remained trapped, every sound echoing a reminder of what it meant to escape the clutches of darkness. As they pulled her out into the daylight, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the world several shades too bright for a girl that had seen nothing but shadows. There she was, pale and dirt-covered, yet alive. Relief flooded over the team. Ava blinked against the sudden brightness, a cascade of tears streaming down her face. Her parents were drawn to her fragility like moths to a flame, holding her close with trembling hands. As they embraced, the weight of sorrow began to lift, even if only for a moment. But the ordeal was far from over. With lingering doubts and whispered fears, they hurried her to the hospital. Surviving the mine was only one part of Ava's battle. The real journey would be grappling with nightmares and reconnecting with the world outside that dark tunnel. The physical wounds would heal over time, but the scars of trauma ran deeper. Everyone expected her to bounce back, to emerge as a warrior. But healing isn't always a straightforward path. The hospital room felt sterile, the bright lights harsh against the backdrop of her previous reality. Nurses fluttered around, taking charts, checking vitals, monitoring her progress. But even in the soft beeping of machines, Ava felt the pressure of returning to normalcy. Conversations took place in hushed tones, tiptoeing around the fear that lingered. Ava felt like an outsider in her own life. While her friends tried to make her laugh, she could still hear the echo of stones crashing and feel the cold sweep of dread wash over her, rearing its ugly head even in the safe confines of her room. Support groups began to form in the town, inspired by Ava's story. Many parents raised their voices to encourage discussion about trauma and recovery, about the realities of facing mortality at a young age. There was strength in vulnerability, they learned together, and healing happens best in circles of understanding. With each passing day, Ava listened to stories from others who had encountered hardship, comforting and validating each other in shared grudges against isolation. Together, they broke down the walls of silence that often surround trauma, speaking freely about their fears. "It's okay to be scared," Ava would say, her voice steady despite the tremors of the past. Months passed, and though the images of the mine threatened to invade her mind like a ghost, Ava felt the warmth of healing wash over her as she opened herself up to those she trusted. Every step was a dance between light and dark, a moving away from the shadows and into the sunlight of possibility. Spring arrived, blossoming with flowers along the hillsides, but inside, Ava still wrestled with sorrow. She attended therapy, where gentle voices guided her, allowing her to sift through layers of pain. The process was often grueling, peeling back the layers just as they had on that day in the mine. Talking about her fear became an avenue for reclaiming her existence. During one session, tears streaming, she spoke about learning to breathe through the panic. "There were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it, but somehow I did," she said, feeling both weak and invincible. Those words resonated, echoing in her journey toward recovery. Ava's path was entwined with the stories of others, and together they began to carve out a new chapter, shedding light on hidden fears while standing firm in collective support. That summer, as Ava stood at the entrance of the mine now adorned with memorials marking its dark history, she turned to her friends who had come to support her. Together, they placed flowers where the shadows used to loom large. "This was a part of our story," she said, her voice steady. The mine became a space of reflection and understanding, a place to acknowledge fear while celebrating resilience. People visited to pay their respects, and a new narrative began to blossom, a story transcending darkness, evolving into one of strength and healing. Ava returned to school in the fall, enveloped by a tumult of emotions. She felt nervous, out of place, an alien wandering into familiarity. But her friends welcomed her with open arms, breaking down barriers with kindness. Teachers incorporated discussions about mental health into their lesson plans, embracing the opportunity to teach empathy while unearthing the realities of trauma. As the years rolled on, Ava transformed her pain into purpose. She began speaking at schools and community centers, sharing her journey with the same courage that had pulled her through the darkest moments. "You are not alone," she would tell young faces staring back at her, wide-eyed and hopeful. Ava was not just a survivor. She was a beacon for others lost in their darkness. Her story became intertwined with the narratives of so many others in Maplewood, a testament to strength, resilience, and hope. She discovered the power of connection, seizing the opportunity to build a community that supported each other. Through her advocacy work, she grew into a leader, encouraging schools to integrate mental health discussions into their curriculum. Each talk became a shard of light in the shadows, illuminating the way for those feeling isolated and unseen. As she stood at the entrance of the old mine one last time, a place where fear and darkness had once engulfed her, Ava understood that it was merely a chapter. She had fought for her life and emerged scarred, yes, but thriving. Her journey wasn't just about surviving the mine. It was about flourishing in its wake. Through the darkness, Ava had learned to embrace the light, and that light was something she now freely shared with the world. The mine may have tried to take her, but it had given her the tools to build a life worth living, filled with hope and connection, a legacy that would illuminate the darkest paths for others to follow. It was early autumn when the first tremors of disaster began to shake the small town of Haven Creek, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering mountains. The leaves were slowly turning, their vibrant hues contrasting sharply against the foreboding clouds that rolled in that evening. Something was brewing, something that would forever change the town's landscape. That night, a 14-year-old girl named Mia would enter the abandoned mine, and darkness would claim her. Mia was an adventurous soul, her laughter like a melody that danced through the air. Known for her vibrant spirit, she was the kind of girl who could turn the mundane into magic with just her smile. She said eagerly, eyes sparkling with mischief as she rallied her friends after school. They hesitated, glancing nervously at the crumbling entrance of the mine, but the thrill of adventure won out and they followed her inside. As they crossed the threshold, the air grew colder, wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. Rusting tools and old lanterns lay strewn across the ground, remnants of a time long past. The mine had been closed for years, its gaping mouth now an unknown world filled with shadows and echoes. Mia led the way, her flashlight casting beams of light that danced along the walls, revealing layers of rock and history. She exclaimed, laughter bubbling up as her friends, now more comfortable, began exploring alongside her. The air was thick with excitement and a hint of fear-tangled mix that drew them deeper into the depths of the earth. But just as Mia turned to share another laugh, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A low rumble echoed through the mine, and before anyone could respond, a crack reverberated through the damp, dark air. The ceiling above them began to crumble. Someone screamed, the sound blending with the deafening roar as rocks and debris tumbled down. In the chaos, Mia stumbled, and in an instant she was gone, swallowed by the shadows within the mine. Her friends emerged outside, breathless and wide-eyed, but Mia was nowhere to be found. As dawn broke over Haven Creek, the town was awash with a thick fog of anxiety and despair. News of Mia's disappearance spread like wildfire. Parents gathered, fear etched on their faces. They organized search parties, their hearts heavy with dread. Echoed through the air, a desperate plea mingled with terror. Rescue teams rushed to the mine, their grim faces reflecting the urgency of the situation. They brought dogs trained to detect human scent, and with each passing hour, hope began to dim. The mine loomed ominously, its entrance now a portal to nightmares. "She has to be okay," Ava's mother cried, barely able to keep herself calm. Days turned to sleepless nights as the townspeople combed through the dense foliage and rugged terrain surrounding the mine. Flyers plastered with Mia's bright smile marked every lamppost, but with each passing day, the hope of finding her alive began to fade. The community was gripped by despair, their conversations laced with fear and anxiety. "It's too quiet," whispered one of the searchers to another, their faces lined with worry. "What if?" Then on the fourth day of searching, a break in the case emerged. A faint cry echoed from deep within the mine. Heartbeats quickened as rescuers rushed to their posts, eager to respond to the sound. Came the call, trembling yet hopeful. "Help." Her voice resonated through the dark, stronger than anyone could have anticipated. Relief rippled through the rescuers as they forged their way deeper, every footfall tinged with urgency. The rescue team quickly navigated through the narrow passages, calling out to Mia as they drew closer. After what seemed like an eternity, they found her trapped but alive. There, under a crumpled mass of rock and debris, she lay. Her eyes met theirs, filled with both terror and hope. She gasped, tears streaming down her face. Carefully, they began to extract her from the rubble, the tension crackling in the air. "Stay still," each rescuer urged, their hands trembling with urgency. Slowly, piece by piece, they freed Mia from her prison. As she was pulled into the light, the air that had felt so heavy began to lift. Her mother shouted, collapsing into her arms as they were reunited. A wave of relief washed over the crowd, and for a moment, the weight of despair lifted. But while the town erupted in joy, Mia's uphill battle was just beginning. Taken to the hospital, she was treated for minor injuries, but the physical healing was merely the tip of the iceberg. She would have to confront the nightmares lurking just beneath the surface. Though surrounded by family and friends, Mia felt more alone than ever. The suffocating darkness of the mine clung to her like a shadow, a constant reminder of the terror she had faced. Despite the celebrations of her survival, the reality was stark. Those who return from the brink often grapple with emotional scars that can linger long after the physical wounds have healed. Mia lay awake at night, her heart pounding as memories flooded back. The echo of collapsing rocks, the feeling of helplessness, the overwhelming fear that her cries wouldn't reach anyone. She began attending therapy, attempting to unravel the tangled web of emotions that had become her reality. "It's okay to be scared," her therapist would say gently. With each session, Mia learned to confront the shadows. She spoke of feeling trapped not just physically but emotionally, the weight of her experience pressing down like a boulder. It was hard to process everything, yet through her vulnerability, she began to find strength. Mia would gather with other kids, sharing stories and learning that healing doesn't happen in isolation. Support groups became a lifeline, a safe space where children could talk freely about fears and hopes. Slowly, the weight on her heart began to ease. "I felt lost for a long time," she admitted during one session. but I know I need to keep moving forward. As weeks turned into months, the town gradually shifted from despair to resilience. Together, they organized community events to fund awareness projects about mental health and safety, teaching children the importance of listening to their instincts. Mia took an active role, finding purpose in her story. "If I can help even one person, it's worth it," she expressed fervently, her passion echoing throughout the gatherings. Then came the day when Mia stood at the entrance of the mine once again, now changed, redefined. It was no longer just a dank hole in the ground, but a symbol of survival. The town came together, filling the entrance with flowers, candles, and notes of encouragement. "This was part of our journey," Mia said, her voice steady but soft. As she glanced at the faces of her friends and family, she felt a surge of warmth. They had endured the darkness together, transforming fear into strength, loss into healing. From then on, the mine evolved into a learning space, a reminder of the importance of community, resilience, and hope. Students visited to learn about safety and the value of speaking up when in danger. Mia led discussions, sharing her story with unyielding honesty. "It's not just about survival," she would say, her eyes bright with purpose. The more she spoke, the more connected she felt to the world around her. Slowly, the darkness that had once consumed her began to dissipate. Instead, she became a light one that dimly flickered in the corners but shimmered with a vibrance that couldn't be extinguished. Years flew by, and the girl who was once lost in that mine emerged stronger, a testament to resilience. Mia went on to become a public speaker, addressing large audiences and inspiring countless individuals. "Every one of us carries stories that shape who we are," she reminded her listeners, strong and unwavering. Her story became a mosaic, each piece a memory transformed into a testament of hope. The mine, now a place of reflection, symbolized not only what had happened, but also how far they had all come. As Mia stood at that now familiar entrance one last time, she looked out at her community gathered behind her. They were no longer standing in fear of the shadows, but rather embracing the light that emerged from the darkness. Mia had been lost and then found, but her journey was about so much more than survival. It was about reclaiming her life, her story, and transforming it into a beacon of hope for others. The mine would always hold memories of struggle, but it had also birthed a new chapter, one defined by connection, healing, and love. In that moment, as she turned away from the mine, the sun shone brightly on her back, illuminating the path ahead. She was ready to embrace whatever life had in store, no longer just a survivor but a warrior radiating light into the world. And that light would forever guide her through the shadows. It was a seemingly ordinary day in the small town of Maplewood, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Locals went about their daily routines, unaware that a 14-year-old girl named Sarah was moments away from disappearing into the shadows of an abandoned mine. The sun beat down, casting long shadows, and a group of friends decided to test their bravery. They stood at the entrance of the mine, its gaping maw both inviting and terrifying. Sarah urged, her voice ringing with excitement. Her friends hesitated, glancing at each other nervously. Old tales echoed in their mind, stories passed down about the mine being cursed, haunted by those who had entered but never returned. Yet Sarah's adventurous spirit was infectious, and soon enough the group felt the pull of curiosity overwhelming their fear. With flashlights in hand, they ventured into the darkness. The air was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and mildew. Sarah led the way, her laughter bouncing off the walls, illuminating the path ahead. The deeper they went, the more awe replaced their fear. Old mining tools, strange rock formations, and bizarre shadows danced in the beam of their lights. Suddenly, a soft rumble echoed through the tunnel. The ground trembled underfoot, a warning that sent chills down their spines. One of them whispered, panic creeping in. Instinctively, they turned to flee, but before they could make it back, the walls of the mine shifted and a cascade of rocks plummeted. Sarah fell, swallowed by the darkness as her friends screamed in horror, their voices lost in the chaos. Outside the mine, terror gripped them as they scrambled to the surface. "Sarah!" they shouted, frantic and breathless. But the mine stood still, its gaping entrance now a dark void that had taken one of their own. Realization hit them like a punch to the gut. She was trapped, alone in the abyss. Within hours, the news of Sarah's disappearance gripped Maplewood. Friends and families gathered at the site, hearts heavy with fear. They declared, eyes misty with hope and desperation. Search parties mobilized immediately. Helicopters soared overhead, casting shadows over the town while men and women scoured the area for any sign of her. For days, the community held its breath. Each sunrise brought renewed hope, but as the hours turned into days, despair seeped into every heart. Flyers with Sarah's bright smile were plastered across town, searching for leads in every possible direction. The whispers of doubt crept in. What if she was really gone? In the quiet of her room, Sarah's mother sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her daughter's favorite stuffed animal, tears streaming down her face. "Please, just come home," she begged silently, praying for a miracle. It didn't matter how many candles they lit or prayers they uttered. Time felt cruel and unyielding. On the fourth day, something shifted in the air. Rescuers gathered again at the mine, drawn not just by hope but by instinct. Voices echoed faintly from deep within the bowels of the earth. "Help!" A soft but unmistakable plea for assistance reverberated through the tunnels. The search team leapt into action, heart rates spiking as they quickly followed the sound. They called her name repeatedly, Sarah. As they navigated the mine's treacherous paths, every footfall came with a mix of fear and determination. Could it really be her voice? Could she still be alive? When they finally reached her, they found Sarah huddled beneath debris, her face streaked with dirt but her spirit unbroken. Relief flooded the rescuers as they approached her, hearts pounding with both fear of what they might find and joy in her survival. "We're here," they assured her urgently. As they began to clear the rocks and rubble, Sarah felt a surge of hope wash over her. Each rock dislodged brought her closer to freedom. She cried, tears streaming down her face as the relentless darkness began to fade. With careful hands, the rescue team pulled her from the mine, and as they emerged into the light, a chorus of cheers erupted from the gathered crowd. Sarah's mother rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter, holding her tightly as if fearing she might disappear again. The entire town erupted into joyous celebration, tears of relief painting smiles on every face. But Sarah's journey was far from over. She was taken to the hospital, where initial joy quickly faded into stark reality. While her body healed, her mind was still trapped in the mine's cold grip. Memories flooded back uninvited, scenes of terror playing on a loop in her mind. The quiet nights were haunted by nightmares, the sounds of rumbling rocks and her cries for help echoing through her subconscious. Psychologically, Sarah was no different from many survivors of trauma, a journey riddled with more than just physical recovery. She would need to find a way to understand and reclaim her strength, to confront the shadows that taunted her afternoons. Days turned into weeks as she navigated the path of recovery. It was through therapy that she began to unravel the tangled web of emotions that came with her experience. The therapist guided her through the pain, helping her articulate her fears. "It's okay to be overwhelmed," the therapist reminded her. In sharing her story, Sarah found solace in vulnerability. She joined support groups where others who had faced trauma congregated. They spoke openly, sharing their fears and laughter, building a sense of community. It was here she discovered she wasn't alone. Every story resonated, each voice echoing her own struggles and triumphs. As autumn turned to winter, the seasons mirrored Sarah's journey. She began to feel stronger, slowly reclaiming her life. Friends surrounded her, inviting her on outings filled with laughter and love. Each small step transformed her outlook, and she started to recognize that healing doesn't happen in isolation, but rather through connection. One afternoon, Sarah stood at the entrance of that old mine, now a hollow reminder of her past. With her friends by her side, she held a bouquet of flowers. "This is part of who I am," she said, a mixture of strength and vulnerability in her voice. In a moment of catharsis, she placed the flowers at the entrance, symbolizing her release from the shadows that had threatened to claim her. The mine, once a source of despair, transformed into a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there is a way back to the light. As spring approached, Sarah became actively involved in advocacy work, turning her experience into a voice for others. She spoke at local schools, sharing her story with younger students about the importance of safety, of listening to their instincts. Each talk became not just an opportunity for healing for herself, but also a chance to relate and connect with those who might find themselves in circumstances similar to hers. "Kids, it's okay to be afraid," she would tell them. "But you don't have to face those fears alone. Because healing is not just about overcoming the physical scars left behind, but also about nurturing emotional wounds so they can bloom into understanding and empathy." Years passed, and what had once been a painful memory evolved into a powerful narrative. Sarah carried the stories of her friends alongside her, crafting her own narrative filled with purpose and hope. The mine had taken something from her, but it had also gifted her the opportunity to rise stronger, more vibrant. Whenever she returned to Maplewood, a sense of pride thrummed in her heart. The town that had once gripped her in vulnerability had become a place of triumph, resilience, and community. The mine was now decorated with stories and memories of those who had faced darkness, with flowers blooming from its base, a stark contrast to the shadows of the past. Now, as she spoke in front of audiences, her voice steady and full of passion, she found intelligence growing within her. "We all walk through our own challenges, but what matters most is not just surviving the darkness, but letting the light in again," she would say, her eyes gleaming with purpose. Mia had been lost within the mine, but during the process she not only found herself, she turned her experience into a beacon for others. She walked away from the shadows, clothed in resilience and courage, forever changed but profoundly alive. The mine, once a symbol of her deepest fear, transformed into a reminder of her greatest triumph, a reminder that life is not just about survival, but also about how we rise up from the ashes of our struggles. And no matter how deep the darkness, the human spirit has a way of shining bright, illuminating the path ahead. It was a day like any other, except for the clouds dark and heavy. They hung ominously over Maplewood. Children played outside, laughter ringing in the air, but that laughter would soon fade, replaced by panic and despair. 14-year-old Lucy had always been the adventurous one, the girl who thrived on challenges, and that day was no different. Her friends dared her to venture into the old abandoned mine that loomed near the outskirts of town, a place shrouded in ghost stories and warnings. And Lucy, with her insatiable curiosity, couldn't resist. She urged, her eyes sparkling with mischief. The old mine sat silent, its mouth wide open, inviting yet foreboding. The air grew cooler as Lucy led her friends inside, flashlights in hand. The darkness enveloped them, the only sounds being the soft whispers of worry from her friends and the occasional drip of water echoing in the distance. As they walked deeper, the mine transformed from a dark cave to a labyrinth of history, walls adorned with faint carvings and remnants of old equipment. The thrill of discovery overpowered any lingering fear. Lucy declared, her laughter echoing, but that laughter would quickly turn into something else. A sudden rumble shook the ground, an earthquake, or perhaps just the weight of time tearing at the mine's structure. One of her friends gasped. Panic erupted as stones began to fall, a brutal reminder of the danger that lay within these walls. Lucy shouted, darting toward the exit, but she didn't make it. Just as she reached the mouth of the mine, a cascade of rocks tumbled down, blocking her escape. In a heartbeat, Lucy was swallowed by darkness, her friends' horrified screams echoing in her ears. They cried, but she was gone, lost in a world of shadows. Outside, chaos erupted. Lucy's friends rushed into the town square, breathless and wide-eyed. They stammered to parents and bystanders. Fear coursed through the crowd like wildfire. Within minutes, search teams mobilized, eager to find the missing girl. As the sun set, searchlights pierced the growing darkness, illuminating the mine's mouth. Rescue workers called out Lucy's name, their voices bouncing off the cold stone walls. "Lucy!" Silence answered them. Days dragged on like a heavy fog. Each sunrise brought renewed hope, but with every sunset, despair hung heavier in the air. Flyers with Lucy's smiling face plastered every lamppost. Townspeople whispered her name, their breaths caught between hope and grief. One mother asked, struggling to keep her voice steady, "She has to be. another replied, though doubt flickered in her eyes. But as hours morphed into days, fear transformed into something more chilling. The missing girl was now the center of a dark cloud that loomed over Maplewood, bringing tension and sorrow to every heart. By the 5th day, the search would reach a critical point. Desperation filled the air as rescuers drilled deeper into the mine, their work guided by instinct and determination. As their tools struck against the earth, a sound broke through the cold silence. A faint voice echoed back to them. Help! Hope ignited among the workers as they hurried toward the sound, their adrenaline surging. Stay with us, they shouted, urgency flooding their voices. They followed the sound, moving deeper into the mine, skirting around narrow bends and dark corners, hearts pounding as they drew closer. Each footfall magnified the tension. What would they find? Was Lucy really down there? When they reached her, Lucy was huddled in a small crevice, her body cold and her spirit seemingly dimmed. She cried, a mixture of relief and disbelief painting her face. Tears streamed down the rescuers' faces as they quickly worked to free her. One worker reassured her, carefully moving debris. Every second felt critical. They could see the fatigue in her eyes and the fear rumbling beneath the surface. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but finally they pulled her free. As she stumbled into the dim light, cheers erupted from above. Her mother shrieked, rushing forward and enveloping her in a tight embrace. The moment was electric. Relief flooded the crowd, and tears of joy glistened in the air. But as Lucy was taken to the hospital, the joy began to slip away. Inside the sterile environment, surrounded by bright lights and concerned faces, Lucy faced a different kind of battle. The physical wounds would heal, but the psychological scars would linger. Those shadows in the mind were not as easily banished. In the calm of her hospital room, Lucy lay awake at night replaying the scenes in her head, the rumble, the darkness, her friends' panicked voices when she vanished. Each noise in the night morphed into echoes of that fateful day, dragging her thoughts spiraling into anxiety. How would she ever escape the memories? Psychologically, Lucy was not alone. Many who survive trauma face struggles that linger long after the incident. Nightmares, anxiety, and an overwhelming sense of isolation can creep in like the darkness in that mind. Confiding in a therapist became her first step toward recovery. "Your feelings are valid," her therapist reassured her, encouraging her to express the fear that clawed at her every waking moment. During therapy sessions, Lucy learned to confront her fears openly, how to face the specter of that dark mind without letting it consume her. As the days turned into weeks, she gradually opened up, weaving a tapestry of her experience with strength and vulnerability. But healing is rarely a straight line. There were days when the weight of her experience felt unbearable. The sound of an approaching storm would send her heart racing, the memories flooding back with ferocity. How could she ever escape the grip of fear? As Lucy returned home, the walls of her bedroom felt stifling, the shadows long and foreboding. Yet within those shadows, flickers of light began to emerge. Friends stood beside her, bright reminders that she was not alone. They went on hikes, shared stories, and laughed together, each small step helping her piece together the parts of herself that she feared had shattered. Then one evening, Lucy stood at the entrance of the mine once more, the place where everything had changed, a threshold between fear and survival. With her friends gathered around her, she placed flowers at the entrance, a tribute to her journey. "This place was part of me," she spoke, her voice steady, "but it doesn't define who I am." The mine now felt different, no longer a place filled with darkness, but a reminder of resilience and strength. Lucy realized that healing meant confronting her past. It meant stepping back into the shadows on her own terms. With time, Lucy became an advocate for others who had experienced trauma, sharing her story to bring awareness and support to those in need. She spoke at schools and community events, her voice ringing with purpose. "It's okay to speak up," she'd tell them. As she took the stage, her heart raced. The thrill of sharing her journey electrified the air. "When I was trapped in that mine, I learned that we are capable of so much more than we think." While the deeper wounds would take longer to heal, each moment of courage sparked inspiration within both her and her audience. Speaking her truth became a lifebuoy, a way to navigate through storms that sometimes threatened to pull her under again. But as Lucy continued her journey, a new chapter began, a chapter filled with uncertainty. One night, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled across a post about other missing children who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Questions emerged like weeds in her mind. Were their stories connected? What if she wasn't the only one who had seen beyond the veil of darkness? With determination surging in her chest, she began to investigate. As she reached out to families in search for answers, she unearthed connections that seemed eerily uncanny. It was as if there was a pattern she was meant to discover, a web of secrets woven into the very fabric of Maplewood. And just as she began to piece everything together, Lucy received an anonymous message. "You need to stop looking." The air around her thickened with tension as a chill ran down her spine. She had already faced the darkness once. How could she refuse to confront it again? With every thread she pulled, the shadows felt closer, and the past was no longer just a memory, it was an impending reality. As the sun set behind the mountains, Lucy stood at a crossroads, her heart pounding. Would she choose to dive back into the darkness and face whatever lay waiting? Or would she walk away, leaving those buried secrets undisturbed? In that moment, with the weight of her decision hanging heavy in the air, Lucy knew the journey was far from over. The shadows were calling her name once more, and deep within, she felt a spark of fear and curiosity ignite, the urge to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And as darkness fell over Maplewood, the echoes of the mind seemed to whisper secrets long hidden, secrets that were waiting for her to uncover. Lucy had stepped into the light, but was she ready to revisit the darkness? Only time would tell.